Here we are. Welcome to the Well-Built Humans podcast. This is our 4th episode, and I have my lovely friend Becky Allen with us today. How's it going, Becky?
It's going great. How about you?
She's cooped up. How about you? You cooped up there over in Madtown, or near Madtown anyway?
Yeah, we are hunkered down.
What's the, I guess I haven't been paying attention to Wisconsin lockdown versus Minnesota lockdown. Are they pretty similar?
I think it was Monday or Tuesday this week, they launched like a stay-at-home initiative, which is like a kind word of saying lockdown, I think, where they don't want to terrify people, but basically only essential businesses are operating, and that's in effect and through like the end of April.
Okay.
Where people are supposed to be home and working from home and making adjustments that way. Schools are closed too, which they are everywhere. So Thankfully we can be outside though. I was telling a friend, I'm like, if this was happening during the winter months, I think we'd have some more issues.
Oh, seriously.
Get outside, and the kids and I got new bikes, so we live right by a bike trail, so we've been doing that, and there's basketball court nearby, and so we're definitely getting out and doing stuff.
Staying active.
Yes.
Awesome. I think it's the same here in Minnesota.
Okay.
But let's not, obviously that's the topic of the day, but let's not let it be the topic of our conversation, because I think there's as relevant and as important as it is to do what we need to do as citizens to protect from COVID-19. I think there's some more important things that humans can talk about, and you're one of the most respected people in my life. I just think you're amazing. You're wonderful. Things that you've gone through and things that you've bounced back from are just incredible. But you know what? The reason why I love, I'm a little biased here towards my podcast here, is people are going to get to hear from real people, not celebrities, not people that have these realities that nobody can relate to, but like real people with real realities that have real wisdom to share. So we're going to get to know Becky Allen here today. So question number one, I guess, and we'll go off on all sorts of rabbit trails, I'm sure, but growing up, where did you grow up, first of all? What was your hometown?
Yeah, Mount Horeb. So just right, it's like my kids are in the same school district, so it's like 10 miles away.
So are some of the teachers that you had growing up, their teachers?
Yeah. Yeah. Makes me feel very old.
That's wild. Because
it's also really comforting, because didn't you just move back home too?
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah.
It's funny because we got the school tour. And some of the teachers were like there, and I'm like, I wonder if they remember me. And they're like, Brandon LaRue. I'm like, what? How do you know that?
That's so good. Yeah. It's cool though. Like I like being able to like picture my kids walking through the halls and know what that felt like, and sitting in the classrooms looks like. And I had a great experience in that school district. Obviously you must have too, because to choose to move back, there's a good feel to that,
Yeah, and that's good to hear you had a great experience. I did have a good experience, but it's interesting, as you grow up and you talk to some acquaintances or classmates, and you realize that they didn't, and I'm like, really? You didn't? Like I had a great experience, and it makes you wonder what about their experience wasn't so great, So growing up, like what, did you had a great school experience. Did have a good family, structure at home? How would you explain or describe kind of growing up?
Yeah, I had a super happy childhood. I'm the oldest in my family. I've got 2 younger brothers, and we were a very active family. We all played sports. Basketball was kind of all of our go-tos, but we all had little spin-offs of that. And grew up in a Christian family, a happily married parents still to this day, 30 plus years later.
Oh, wow.
And I was very involved. I always liked leadership roles, so I was always played big parts in that, in like my church or youth group, or like other like local organizations or student council, that kind of thing. I was always kind of naturally drawn to those types of things. But yeah, I had a very happy childhood. And it was great. Yeah.
So what other sports did you play? You played basketball. What were the spin-offs?
I played basketball. I did a little bit of softball and a little track and field and golf, actually, I played.
Oh.
Yeah.
And
So,
did you do that all the way through? So did you play 4 sports all the way through?
oh, no, I played basketball. So my family, we have terrible knees. We all have torn ACLs. I've only done it once. My brothers have done it 2, 3, 4 times.
Wow.
So those surgeries all eventually ended our basketball careers in high school at some point or another. So I played softball growing up. I did track and field in middle school, and then golf came as a sport when I was in high school, I think my junior year. And the guy I was dating at the time played golf, and so I wanted to be impressive. And also the other reason is you also got out of the most school because the invitations were during the day, invitationals, the meets, because you can't have lights on the golf course at night, so you got to miss a lot of school if you played golf. But I do love it. It is something I've picked up in the last couple of years that I really enjoy. So
I'm terrible. I'm terrible at golf.
So mental, like so many sports are, but it's like the more frustrated you get, it's like the worse you play. It's a good challenge for sure.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Yeah. It's hard to take the baseball swing out of a baseball.
That's very true. Very
so what so you got 2 kiddos, and so Dawson and Lainey. So what Dawson's how old now?
He's 10. He's in 4th grade.
Oh wow.
And Lainey's birthday's next week. She'll be 6, and she's in kindergarten.
So Dawson's probably getting pretty heavy into sports then, right?
Totally. He is
a wrestler.
He's not a wrestler. Wrestling genes sort of skipped our family. But he is obsessed with basketball, and it's been so cool to see the evolution of his personality through just as that's one of the cool things about being a parent, right? Is to see what attributes and things your kid sort of grows into. But he is so obsessed with basketball. So throughout this like whole, COVID thing, I don't know if you've heard about COVID. There's an epidemic going around.
Oh yeah.
So we've been home a bunch, but he played on 2 different basketball teams during the winter and spring, and he's supposed to play on another basketball team spring and summer, and that's been shut down for now. Obviously, hopefully will be reopened again soon. But in the meantime, he's been watching these YouTube videos about basketball workouts online, and so he wrote himself a basketball ball handling dribbling program. And so he goes downstairs and does it. It probably takes about 20 minutes to go through, and he does it like 2 to 6 times a day on his own initiative. I don't ask him. He just goes downstairs, does his basketball workout, comes back up. So like he is very disciplined and he's very consistent. It's like very impressive to me. I'm not wired the same way. He gets that from
yeah. That's awesome. That's passion, man. That's passion at an early age. So but he's basketball is kind of his main deal. Does he play anything else?
Baseball and football.
Baseball and football. Okay.
Yep.
That's great.
Yeah.
Because that's a topic that each interview we've done so far, we've gotten on the topic of sports specialization and the pressure of kids that are on kids nowadays, and then just the pressure from call it society pressure or whatever of kids to specialize early on. And in your area, do you see like our club sports being like with basketball? It seems like there's the club sport of basketball kind of pushes this year-round participation. And do you feel is there a pressure in your region where you're seeing kids specialize at a young age?
I think most of his friends are still playing at least 2 sports, if not more. It is interesting because, so his football season ran right up to basketball, started in November, and then his basketball season went through mid-March. And then his basketball was supposed to be expended mid-March through end of July. That was a select club team. But he also was going to play baseball too. And so he was going to do both sports. Honestly, the pressure for me is a little bit different in the sense of he just loves it so much. And so we want our kids to do things they love. Mm-hmm. And so I feel more the pressure of how do you like foster that without it becoming like an unhealthy obsession maybe, or like bringing balance to that, because he is still playing other sports and he's happy to do that, you know. But I can see moving forward, especially if his friends continue, he wants to be with his buds, you know, playing.
Yeah.
And so it's more that, not necessarily a pressure from other like teams or parents or coaches. It's more just like if he had his own way, I mean, he probably would play basketball 24/7 all year round.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I don't know about you, but like when I was growing up, I played three all the way through, but like I never, as much as if I could go into my shoes back then, football was my favorite sport to play. I was probably most talented at baseball, and wrestling was just like my third sport, even though it's the one I'm most passionate about now.
Mm-hmm.
It was my third sport, but I never went to, and I'm not saying my way is the best way. I'm just, I never went to any football camps outside of football season. I went to maybe one or two wrestling camps my whole entire life. And, that's like K through 12. And then I never went to a baseball camp. I played baseball when it was baseball season. I played football when it was football season, and I wrestled when it was wrestling season. And it's just an interesting conversation to have with people about kids and how they develop and burn out. And as long as they're having fun, I guess is always a good gauge, right? If they are looking forward to going to those competitions and they're looking forward to going to practice, why take it from them, but I just, I've also seen the other side, and it's unfortunate, I don't know if you've seen any of that, but
yeah, and not as much, but you're involved with athletes, 5-6 years older than Dawson, and I can see how over those next 5 or 6 years there is, pressure to keep up is kind of more what I feel. Yeah.
For sure. For sure. Switching gears. So high school, you had a great, I didn't know that about how involved you were with all the leadership stuff, but that adds up. That adds up. I can see where it's translated well to what you're doing and what you have done. So where did you go to college, and what did you study in college?
I went to a small private school in Madison, Edgewood College. So my mom actually worked there. So I went to a different school my freshman year, but then she got a job there, so I got to go tuition free. So I transferred to that, which is pretty good decision. Yeah. And so I went to school for graphic design. And I remember taking a couple of classes in high school. I always have liked art and being creative. And I remember taking a graphic design course in high school, and my teacher sort of saying like, you could do this as a profession. Like, I see you really like it. And that was kind of the first time to me in my life, this might sound crazy, but in high school, where I realized I didn't have to be like, a teacher. I don't know. I just felt like that was probably what I was going to have to be. It was just, my mind was sort of open to new options, that like I could do something creative and that I was excited and passionate about. And so I loved graphic design, and the part that I loved about it, which speaks to sort of who I am now and why I like it so much, is I love process, and I love starting with nothing and taking it through a process to get to something. And so I started doing that with art, and seeing like the process that would work, working with people and collaborating to come up with something. And now it's kind of translated more to doing that with people. But that is really what I love. So I went to Edgewood and did that, and graduated, and started internship in college and got a job there out and worked and did that for a few years and loved it. I really did. I do remember though, like I've said this maybe to you before, I remember it's like, you go through kind of all of the things and check all the boxes. And then I remember being graduated and sitting in my cubicle at work, and I worked for a couple of months. And then I remember just one day being like, so like, this is it for like 40 years, and they just didn't sit well with me, Yeah.
I do know. Yeah. I think we're cut from the same cloth there. But that's good perspective for people to hear, because I think everyone, and you know what, there's honor in every work, right? In every job, and to do a good job no matter what it is. But I think it's crossed everyone's mind at some point or other, and And then there's like this line drawn in the sand where you choose to cross it or you choose to stay. And not saying one way is better than the other, but one is definitely more adventurous, I would say. I think everyone would maybe at least agree with that, that the one is way more adventurous, where you step outside and you go create, with your graphic design and creative background, you go create your future, you go create your income streams, you go, use your creativity to go make a living. So that's interesting that you brought that up, and I might be getting a little ahead of where I was going, because I want to talk about Win the Day Pro and kind of, but before we get to that, let's take a step back, because there's a story behind Win the Day, like that. I mean, even without a story, Win the Day is kind of like a cool slogan. It's almost like Nike, just do it. Yeah. Win the Day is awesome, but it didn't just pop up as a creative slogan for you. There's a story behind that. So got through college, got a job. So when did you meet your husband, Darren?
In the 3rd grade.
That's right.
Yeah. So his first day of school was a little traumatic for me, because in 3rd grade, things really matter, like, being first alphabetically. And so my best friend at the time was in his class. And so she was always first alphabetically, but because he was the new kid, he bumped her. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like the nerve. So that's weird that I remember that, but I don't ever really remember being friends with him until I think it was maybe like 5th grade. He kept asking me out to be his girlfriend, and I just thought he was kind of goofy and just sort of whatever. So he ended up dating my best friend, or whatever, like 10 or 11. Yeah. And so then we were we ended up dating in 8th grade for a while. And then we were good friends throughout high school. And then we started dating right before we went off to college, separate colleges. So we did long distance throughout college. I think we got engaged when we were like 20, and then got married right after we were 22, I think, maybe. So right out of school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Young babies.
Yeah, seriously. Mm-hmm. So, I know this is, I have permission to talk about this. So, but even as the interviewer of you, it's, I find it not easy to talk about this, yet I know you're completely fine with it. Mm-hmm. Is losing Darren. So, how long were you guys married, and kind of take us through, just, the good times, and then the news, and just kind of that journey. Yeah. And then just kind of how you, from your perspective, how you kept together. I know there's probably some things that I don't know, because there's just always things that families, and I'm not asking you to divulge all those details unless you want to, but like when you broke down and lost it. But kind of take us through that journey, because I know that's something very real that a lot of people have dealt with, or our mortality rate's 100% here as a human. So we're going to deal with it. Right. So kind of take us through that, because as a friend of yours, I thought you navigated it wonderfully, from my perspective. Yeah. But let's hear kind of what you have to say about that.
Yeah. So we got married when we were 22, and Darren was a personal trainer. And so we always kind of had this like adventurous sort of entrepreneurial leadership component to us. I would say he definitely drew that out in me, but then I think I also did that for him too. When you've got a partner in something, it feels so different. You sort of feel a little more invincible. And so, we had this we were very different, very opposite. And so there was definitely some friction points within that when you are different than your spouse. But there's also a really beautiful thing when you can figure out how to kind of make that dance work and lean on each other in areas where they're stronger and where you're weaker, right? And so I feel like we got the opportunity to work together through Advocare, which is how we met Brandon and Jenny. And it was difficult at first, but once we kind of found our pocket, it was incredible. It was so fun. we had Dawson pretty young in our marriage. I think we were married maybe like 2 years or something. And we tried to get pregnant again and had some troubles with that. And I had some health stuff come up. But I think through that, we really always, or never really, I would like to say, took things for granted. Like being able to work together and have so much time together and get along so well, like we never took that for granted. And so that's kind of was always our lens and perspective, was we were just so grateful. And because of those earlier experiences, and I want to talk about this later if we don't come through it now, but just uncertainty and sort of like what that does for a person to like live and sit through uncertainty. And so we had done that previously. And so we were kind of able to lean on that to make some other decisions in our young married life about just career or starting different businesses or leaving, you know, the normal kind of corporate jobs, which are great for some people, but it just wasn't for us. So because we'd walked through uncertainty before, we were able to kind of dig into that and sort of like hold on to that as we, you know, moved forward. And so then little Miss Laney came along, you know, we're just kind of in the trenches together. I mean, raising kids, as you know, you're in that phase, it's hard. And, you know, nobody says anything nice at 2 and 3 in the morning when you're sleep deprived. And so we had our issues to work through that as well, but we kind of came to like a great space with that, and ended up building the house that we're in now. That was in September of 2016 would have been. So I've been here about 3.5 years then. That makes sense. And this was kind of like our forever home, like the place that we were going to like be together. And so we were just kind of coming out of the trenches a little bit, where Lainey was old enough, or starting to be old enough to do a little more. We can kind of breathe again finally. And Darren was actually in a car accident in August, and really shook him up bad, a super bad concussion, and just it lingered for a long time. And he had been dealing with some issues and things too, but we weren't quite sure what they were, just like weird stomach pains and stuff, but then they would go away. He's always had a touchy stomach and whatever. But then it was December of that year that he threw out his back, and we thought it was with lifting, because he'd done that before. He likes to lift heavy, and he would push it too far sometimes and throw out his back. So he was kind of like going to the chiropractor and down and out and on the couch. And it was like Christmas time, which is just nuts as like a family. And so I remember wrapping presents and shopping and getting everything ready. And he's just like out on the couch and just kind of like gritting my teeth and like, no, it's fine. Yeah, I'll just do it all. It's all good. You know, kind of a brat. But then the pain just got to be so excruciating for him that he couldn't even function. And I was like, okay, you've got to go to the doctor. So early January of 2017, he went to the doctor, and I was home with the kids. I didn't even go with them because we just didn't really think anything of it, you know? So he went in and met with his doctor, and the conclusion they kind of came to was actually that it was a gallbladder issue. So Darren used to be a lineman in high school and lost a little over 100 pounds his senior year of high school and his freshman year of college. So sometimes when people have such a dramatic weight loss, their gallbladder just kind of can't handle it. And so they were going to do a test to just determine that that's what it was, do a surgery, live with an altered life diet, but then it'd be fine. It's like, okay, good. Thank God we got an answer. So then the next day he went in to go get an ultrasound done. And again, I didn't go with, because we just thought it was a simple thing, and I was just home with the kids. And it was taking forever, hours and hours and hours. And I was irritated because I had some stuff I needed to do that day and work from home. And it's hard to work from home with kids, like we're all learning. And so he called and picked up the phone, or I picked up the phone and was just like, what, you know, where are you? Was just kind of my tone. And he was like, they don't think it's my gallbladder. I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, they think it's either Hodgkin's lymphoma or testicular cancer. And you're just like, what? Like, for so many people, I'm sure just like you know, when you're in the health and wellness industry, you sort of become like a grounding point for a lot of people. And a lot of people look to you for advice and insight. And, you know, you're sort of like the model, or there's pressure to feel the model of that sometimes. And so Darren was just sort of, in my opinion, in a lot of people's minds, like the epitome of like health and wellness. I mean, he ate healthy all the time. You know, he just took really great care of himself. So that it was just shocking, of all the people in the world. Like I felt like he was untouchable, you know? And so I got someone to take the kids. I like took off. I don't even really remember driving there, but I got to the clinic just in time as he was coming out. And the doctor called as soon as he got in my car and said, it's testicular cancer and it's stage 4. It's doesn't look good. Or no, she didn't know that yet. She was like, it's testicular cancer. We can tell from the tests. I need you to go to this clinic now and get some scans done so we can get a progression of how far along things are. So we went and did that later that day, and our day ended. I remember the doctor had like the MRI chart or like scans up, and it was just, I mean, it was everywhere. I mean, it was just, I remember looking at Darren and his face was just white, and just couldn't believe, like, it just was like out of a horror movie, really. It didn't feel like real life, and so I think a week or two later, he had surgery. And then we started treatment right away. And so testicular cancer actually has one of the most rigorous treatment plans of most cancers, or at least when he was going through it, it did. But it was such a tried and true method because testicular cancer is typically very curable, even in late stages. And so they haven't messed with the method because it's just worked so well. So even though it's really rigorous and intense, it works. So they haven't really changed much. Mm-hmm. So he would go in and get chemo. And so we just had to kind of figure out, I mean, thankfully we've got great supportive friends and family, but it was a lot. I mean, we have our own business, 2 young kids, taking care of him, getting him to appointments and stuff too. And then trying to maintain some kind of level of sanity for myself through it was really interesting.
Man, I didn't know that. I mean, I knew that he was stage 4 when you guys found it. I just didn't know it was lit up kind of like a Christmas tree,
And you know what, actually, one other thing too, I don't remember if you were there or not, but when we were at Success School at Six Flags, it was that July, and Darren was like out of commission. Like he had something really bad that he was messed up. And so Derek Doshner had Darren on the floor, like the gravel ground at Six Flags, and was like stretching him out. Were you there? Do you remember that?
I don't remember that. I mean, I was probably there, but I didn't remember that particular moment. No.
Okay. Yeah. And it was just kind of that same pocket of pain that he ended up continuing to have that would pop up, that was showing up there. And then he was getting sick because of the pain. And so we just thought he like ate something bad or something, because then the next morning it was gone. And that's what would happen, as things would shift. But I was thinking about that a while back about Derek stretching him out. And I think that was probably even something we were dealing with 6 months earlier. We just didn't know what it was yet, Yeah.
That's wild, man. That's wild. I mean, I can relate to a lot of this because I lost my mother, but it's interesting. That's why I was so.
Were you?
What?
Were you like in high school when your mom passed?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I lost my mom when I was 14. So I was 12 when she was diagnosed, and it was stage 4. And the news wasn't positive about the potential outcome. It was basically they kind of gave her the 2-year notice. And said, we're going to fight this thing, but this is probably what you're looking at. So just hearing it from your perspective, I always kind of wondered, as I got later in life, like my dad, I got to have this conversation with him at some point. And it's just like, how did you do it? And I get a chance with you because you're in a similar stage of life right now that my dad was when my mom was battling cancer, and then she passed. Like, how did you handle it? And I get the opportunity to ask you that. So as all this is going on, so he's diagnosed, going through rigorous treatment, that puts him probably out of commission many days. And how does a woman, handle the responsibilities of a household when of maybe mom and dad a lot of days? And how did you handle that?
Yeah. A lot of it's blurry, but I mean, I'm a doer, and I'm more content to be doing than being idle. Okay. And so part of being a caretaker is I was set up to be a doer. And so, you know, mastering the schedule and getting the kids around and taking care of him and getting his meds and making dinner, you know, like all those things kind of set up to my strengths. I mean, in a weird way. And so when I was never idle. I mean, and when there was a plan and action, like I could kind of keep moving forward. The days that were really tricky would be after we would, you know, try something kind of treatment or whatever. And, you know, we never got good news, I don't think, ever, practically. And so it would just feel like a gut punch, you know, like you got the wind knocked out of you, and it would take a couple days to sort of absorb the blow, but then you'd get back up and you'd fight again because you just have to, you know. And there would be days where like, you know, we moved into this house just a couple months, and then Darren was sick, but thankfully our house is set up where like he was able to be kind of in his own, you know, kind of quiet space. But we don't have a lot of memories of him like in this house, you know, because he was sleeping most of the time, or at the hospital or whatever. But like I remember my birthday one year coming, and we don't do crazy things for birthdays, but like we, you know, put an effort and make the other person feel cared for and appreciated. And he couldn't even rally on my birthday, which is something, he just took such great care of me, you know. And so when he couldn't even like rally on my birthday, it was like, wow, he's really hurting, you know, because Darren, you know, he battled for 15 months and never once complained. Like never negative, never complaining about how he's feeling, puking his brains out, not even complaining. Like, thank God I can walk, you know. I mean, like he never complained. There was one evening at our house that I basically forced him to be like, can you just say that this sucks? Like, can you just please? Because like, you know, but I think he just was one of those people who just like, he thought if he said it out loud, it would take root and something would happen with it. And so he just, you know, stayed away from that. But Darren was, yeah, I mean, he just never complained. But, you know, he faded. Like, I think this was it was fast, but it was also so gradual that just like day by day, a little bit of him was like a little less and a little less and a little less. And, he loved to like write and speak, and he still did a lot of that like on social media. And that's why I think people were like, oh, he's totally fine, he put up a Facebook post. But it was like, I would read his Facebook post and I was like, dang, I haven't talked to him in like 4 days, and like he's going to give that to the world, but like he can't talk to me. And like I get it was bigger than me, you know, but I think it was those moments where I just realized like, wow, he's really hurting, you know.
Yeah. What do you think? Let's talk about faith for a moment. Mm-hmm. You know, you said you grew up in a Christian home. You know, did you guys, how is faith played in all this for you guys? You know, for speaking for yourself and speaking, you know, on Darren's behalf, how has that gotten you through some of this? Or, you know, even before we get there, where did it start? Like, you know, you grew up, but when did it become yours?
Yeah, so I remember like my dad says him and I had a conversation when I was 5, you know, and I like asked like God into my life and like Jesus to be like, you know, my leader and kind of my foundation. I mean, obviously I don't remember that, but it was always an integral part of my life. I never really had like a falling away process. I do remember going to a youth convention like in high school. I don't know what year it was, but it was a summer. And I remember kind of being at a fork in the road where it was like, you know, what path am I going to take here? Like, am I going to, you know, follow God and like what he's got for me and like do that, or am I gonna like start to enjoy some extracurriculars and just different things where there was the pressures of that. And so going to that conference just really solidified it for myself, you know, where it was just like, this is important, this is for me, and this is, I want this, like I want to choose this, even if it's unpopular and makes me different. I was always okay with being different, and so that didn't bug me, but that's sort of like when I chose it for me. And so Darren and I were good friends always in high school. He had a faith background for sure, but I think all of a sudden when he wanted to like be in my world, like he was showing up in my church and in my youth group and like things like that, right? And so like yeah he was all of a sudden leading youth groups with me, like younger, like middle school kids when we were in high school and stuff. So it was definitely always an element for us. But I think once we kind of like joined forces and, you know, were engaged and married, it's something that we definitely spurred on in one another, you know. And so it's always been very important piece for us. I think there's been times where it's like, you know, he was feeling more strong or I was feeling more strong, just in different places. And so we kind of took turns, maybe not leading, but just sort of standing in that gap maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's always been something important to us for sure.
Yeah, I love talking about that with people because I know, I mean, it's, in my opinion, it's, and you might agree with me, it's the most important question we'll ever ask is about our eternity and where do we place our trusts? You know, what are you going to do with Jesus, essentially? What are you going to do with this guy?
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people, I've been bolder more recently and just having conversations like this with people and realizing that when you ask people if they believe in God, most people say yes. But then if you dig a little deeper, you realize that there's really not a relationship with this Jesus guy. And like there's an actual process to this, and there's fruit that comes from it, and there's a different lifestyle that comes with it too, which scares people, I think. But as you know, there's beauty. There's so much beauty amongst it that I just, you know, as a Christian, I feel people are missing out on.
Yeah.
And I read nearly every one of those posts that Darren wrote, and how did, best you can from your perspective, how did his relationship flourish amongst with Jesus during his battle with cancer?
Oh yeah. You know, he spent a lot of time alone, sitting in, you know, just like laying in a bed or waiting for an appointment. You know, I mean, he had a lot of people with him, but sometimes, you know, just there was gaps of him being alone, or if he wasn't feeling up for conversing with people, you know, so he had a lot of like downtime. And I mean, he really turned into God, and just like he never was resentful. I mean, he never was like asking why questions. He really wasn't, but it was just more like what can I do with this, and what do you want from me in this, was more or less the types of questions he was asking, which was really pretty amazing. And just yeah, he really grew some roots through that for sure.
Yeah, it was inspiring. And I know there's, you know, like you explained it, with that there was probably some friction in your household just because there was that growth there, and then there's your relationship, and it's like, man. But then as you know, the Christian standpoint, we're kind of like, well, that's kind of how it should be, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I just can only imagine, you know, you're in your shoes, the tension you must have felt with that,
Yeah.
because I think I would feel the same way, you know.
There's
So
definitely, but there's also like an understanding. Like I just knew it was something bigger. Like, you know what I mean? Like I knew that he needed to step into those spaces because he was supposed to. So there was tension, but there was also an understanding, you know, of it too.
sure. And that's the genesis, really, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Of Win the Day, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, at least my understanding is, as he was making those posts and stuff, it was always win the day, win the day. Did it start before that, or was that kind of where it stemmed from?
Nope, that's where it started from. He was having some quiet time with God. It was earlier, maybe he was maybe like 2 months into treatment or something like that, I think. And Darren was like, he was such a planner, and he was such a big dreamer. And so he was constantly, me and like our friends kind of made fun of him about it, because we would be like 25 and he'd be like, hey, you guys, when we're retired, do you think this would be a good place to, we're like, what are you doing? Like, stop. Like, but that's just how he worked. And he was always 100 steps ahead of everybody else. And so, I mean, he struggled with that, to like be in the moment, but that was just who he kind of was. And so he was having some quiet time one day, and he just was struggling with this friction point of, um, I have all these things I wanted to do, but I feel so limited. So like, how can I still, you know, have forward progress here? So he felt like God just impressed upon him, like, win the day, that was the saying. And what Darren took from that, and like what he felt like God was speaking to him through that, was like, you woke up today, you got one day. You have no idea how many days I'm going to string together for you, but you do have today. So in this day, what can you do given your limitations or freedom? How can you win this day? Like, what does that look like for you? And surrender all the rest. Like, lay it all out, leave it all out on the table. Like, how can you show up, love well, and do your best today and win the day? So that became his sort of anthem and his battle cry as he sort of walked through all of that. And so some days, he did have some days where he just seemed pretty relatively himself, you know, where he could work out and he could do training sessions and he could, you know, hang with me and the kids and be outside playing. And then there's other days where he was like flat out, like laid out for the day. But even still within that, like, can I read today? You know, can I take a shower? Can I walk around the block? Can I keep my mind like strong, like in this? So it became this daily perspective that really helped him and us too, like me and the kids. Well, the kids were a little young for it, but me too. And just like, you know, if I look too far ahead, you start to lose it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good mantra, man. It really is. I think it's wonderful that you've, you know, so when did your business idea with it, after Darren passed and, you know, was it like, were you grieving and it just kind of came to, or how did that process, how did you come up with to turn it into a business? And what are you doing with the business? Like, tell everybody. I hope someone watches this and says, I need what she's got.
Yeah. So Darren had been sick for about a year. So it ended up being about like 3 or 4 months before he passed away. Our friend Pam and Rich came to visit us. And Pam's a great like leader and mentor and friend of ours, always has been for a while. And she and her husband were like walking out our front door. I can still picture it clear as day. And I was at the front door and, you know, because I should back up, you know, Win the Day became a platform Darren wrote from, which you said, and then we had t-shirts made and that became a big thing. And so many people identified with that because we all get too far ahead of ourselves. And so focusing on 24 hours at a time is just so much more manageable. And it feels, it resonated with a lot of people. And so Pam was one of the people that really kind of championed us through that. And so she was leaving and she was walking out the door and she turned around and she goes, "Oh, by the way, I was supposed to tell you, I was praying for you guys the other day and the Holy Spirit told me to tell you to start Win the Day Productions." And then she like got in her car and drove away. And I turned and looked at Darren and I was like, it's almost like when it's under your nose, you just can't see it. I'm like, how did we not see this? You know, that this is like an attitude and a lens and a perspective that we can help share with other people, you know? And so I built a website pretty quickly after that. And then we together wrote up a mission and a vision statement. And we were going to pursue that. Like once he was well, that was kind of going to be our platform that we were going to step up together. And then when he passed, so it was about 2 years ago this month, I kind of honestly forgot all about it. I mean, it came up a couple times, but I was like, there's just no way I could do this by myself. It's not right. I'm not qualified. I'm not, you know, I just like, I can't. And so I kind of like set it aside. And in May, this last May, we had a pretty big, you know, shift in our life with our business kind of, and same thing happened for you and Jenny, losing our income. And you know, I was so appreciative for that and thinking like, oh, you know, Darren built this, you know, for me and the kids and what a legacy he left and something that shoot.
That's okay.
Sorry, phone is ringing. Where did you go? Okay, there you go. So, okay. So then when this all kind of came undone, I was like, well, what do I do now to provide for my family? Mm-hmm. You know, and we've talked about being cut from similar cloths in the sense of like, you know, there's a lot of options that I had presented to me, and that I knew I could do, but I also wanted to pick something that I was excited about. Yeah. And so after all the frenzy and fury of things kind of becoming undone and communicating that with people and letting them know, I finally got some quiet time. And it was Sunday night. And I remember like, it was like this. I was like, okay, God, what do you got for me now? And like immediately, like, you know, when you're like having a conversation with a friend and you're waiting for them to like stop talking so you can finally interject. Like it was like I was like, win the day productions. Like he couldn't like get it out fast enough. And I was like, duh. You know, I've been being equipped for this literally my entire life, you know, and it looks different than what I thought. But, you know, the speaking and the writing and, you know, the coaching and just helping spread that perspective is something that I've sort of been set up to do. So that's sort of when I picked up Win the Day productions and kind of ran with it. And so it's kind of multifaceted and trying to figure out, you know, different ways to help people. But the bottom line is just, I think people need to be reminded of, you know, big picture is great. It's great to have a vision and a plan. It's really important, in fact, but we can get so lost in that we forget we have to take action and do things today in order to connect ourselves to that preferred future. And so I just want to kind of come alongside people, help them figure out who they are, who they were created to be, what their strengths are, how their wirings are. And then within that, give them permission to move forward in a way that makes sense for them and in a direction that they're meant to, but to not get lost in that daily progression, I think is just so important. I mean, we all, well, that's another tangent I'll go on in a second, but that's what Win the Day is looking. So we got cool swag and clothing line and that kind of thing, but the heart and center, like the heart and core of the message is just to help people step up into leadership roles based off of who they are and how they were equipped, and to give themselves grace and patience as they figure this all out. I mean, it's can be complicated sometimes, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So like, some examples would, you know, and I suppose that could stem a lot of places, but are you finding business people that are looking to start their own business, and you're kind of helping guide that process with your, you know, with your strengths and process? Or is it, you know, if people just lead and get promotions, what kind of you looking for in case I can help you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of a little bit twofold. It's so sort of, there's just like a general sort of like cultural movement and community I'm trying to just create to connect people just in general, right? Of just like a message and a mantra that they can take a little bit with them every day, right? So that's kind of what the social media is about, and doing a podcast, that's what that will be about, the apparel, wearing the Win the Day, and just being reminded of that for them, you know? And then kind of the next step beyond that would be connecting with other people who feel called into leadership roles, whether that's, you know, it doesn't really matter what it is. It's more just like a character or like an integrity piece of the person who knows like there's more for me, but I don't know what that looks like. Like, can you help me figure out, like, is this direction right for me? Is this aligned with where I'm supposed to be going? Like, I don't even know what I'm good at. So it's just kind of like slowing down and getting with people and coming alongside them and helping them see the stuff that's, you know, right under their nose, and just hold the space to help people process and just slow down to kind of speed up. So some of it is small business owners and entrepreneurs. Some of it is just people who have corporate jobs that have great leadership roles, and they want to make sure they're equipped and doing the best job for their team. And other people have like successful side hustles that are doing like the coaching, whether one-on-one or in a group setting too, but that's sort of like the core of that. That makes sense.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. I mean, it's when you're dealing with helping people become more in a leadership role, I mean, it's endless, you know? So that's just good to know of anybody who watches this, or how I can be like, hey, you need to talk to my friend Becky, you know? And, but there was a word, about 25 minutes ago that you said you wanted to talk about, uncertainty. Was that the word?
It is.
Yeah.
And that might be a good place to kind of like wrap things up too, but I've been thinking a lot about that because we're obviously living in uncertain times. And I had somebody ask me about it the other day. And I think I felt like maybe my answer was a little insensitive. And then we kind of got to talk about that. But, you know, I think we've all, if we look back on however many years we've been on this planet, we've all walked through uncertainty, you know, whether that was where, you know, where am I going to live? Where am I going to go to school? Waiting for a job to, you know, come to fruition, or a relationship, like, or, waiting to have a baby, like waiting for an illness to go away. Like, we've all had pockets of uncertainty in our life. And if we look at those moments of uncertainty, I think we can all connect a major growth piece that happened from that, or a shift our life took in a direction that we can't imagine and not have taken that, right? And so, and also that uncertainty did not last for forever. There was an end point to it. It probably didn't align with our timing, what we wanted, but God, who's got a bird's eye perspective and picture of all of this, there's an end to like what we're feeling right now. And so that's just been my encouragement with the people that I'm coaching and talking with, and the circles, is just like, I know the uncertainty is really hard, but like, look in your past when you were in moments that you felt uncertain, and what did that build in you and through you, and what came out of it. And also, like, it did end. And so, not to make light of all that's going on, but like, I've lived through the worst uncertainty that I could have ever imagined, and I'm still standing upright. I've spent days in bed, and not to say that it's all been a cakewalk by any means, but it builds something in you. Uncertainty does. And so I just want to encourage people to like find that in them, that grit that they can continue to like build on and dig in, and just knowing that like it's like a daily perspective through this, in uncertainty, and just that it will shift eventually.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, because I know it's really interesting, the different perspectives that you get from friends, family, social media, about what's going on right now. And, you've been wired to, because you've actively built this in you, it wasn't just wired. God just didn't say, Becky, you will, every time there's adversity in your life, you will be strong and you will learn profound things amongst it. Yeah. No, you've read good books, you've trained your mind, and you've learned that amongst adversity, usually there's a blessing. And, even in the worst of times, when you lose a husband, or, I could see when I lost my mother, those things you don't wish upon anybody else. However, when you take a step back and go, man, did I grow? What did I learn during all of that? It's profound. Yeah. And like right now, I know there's going to be, the 80-20 principle will probably apply here, but there'll be 20% of people who will have use this opportunity, being locked down, quarantined, isolated, whatever you want to call it, and they're going to use it to just grow. They're going to read more books than they ever have. They're going to restore relationships that are fractured within their four walls, and they're going to get their health and fitness right. Because guess what? We all have an excuse to win here rather than finding excuses to lose. But there'll be 80% of people who will find more reasons just to do more of the same. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that was one of the last points I wanted to ask you, was just, adversity and it being a blessing. But you already hit the nail on the head. So I think your win the day philosophy is exactly what the world needs right now, is to win every single day right now, because each day, like, I'm kind of wired like you. I'm a doer, and sometimes I can get so doing that I kind of lose sight of present moments. And like right now, I get to go back inside and I get to go play with my kids, and just being a better dad during this time. I could go on and on and on, but I love what you said about uncertainty, and I love what you're doing with Win the Day. And speaking on my whole family, we love you, and you are a well-built human, and I'm so honored that you accepted the invite to be on here. Yeah. And if I can reciprocate in any way, you know that I'm down.
I will be. I have lots of time to learn right now, things that I've said that I was going to learn that I haven't slowed down enough to do. And so a podcast is on mine. So we'll have to have you, back on too. But I just really appreciate you and your family too. And you guys walked out a lot of this with us and just were always so sweet. And, Darren thought the world of you, which I know you know that, but he just really, I know, I wish you guys would have got more time together, because I think you guys could have built something pretty great.
Yeah.
And I think too, like, just like who you are and how you lead and what you're teaching people in like to oppose idleness, I think is just something that's really key and huge. And I just have always appreciated how you've never strained from that. So you're doing a very good thing too. And so I'm happy to be a witness of that as well. So
I appreciate that. Well,
yeah.
let's just keep encouraging one another, keep impacting the world. We can virtual elbow bump.
Sounds good.
Spread COVID. I really appreciate you being on, and I hope we can do it again.
Deal. That sounds great. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Becky.
Bye.